Taoiseach, I want to condemn the intimidation and aggression we've seen outside asylum seeker accommodation in recent weeks. In Dublin, homeless asylum seekers were terrorised and their tents set alight. In Inch, we saw checkpoints set up on public roads with people asked to confirm their ID details before they walked around and were allowed to go about their lawful business. In Santry over the weekend, masked people on the far right acted with apparent impunity and controlled entry into an industrial estate. Last night, it was revealed that Gardaí in Corofin were investigating an alleged assault of a 70-year-old man during another protest against asylum seeker accommodation. He had to be hospitalised. The scenes we're witnessing around the country are frightening. There are fears about this violence and intimidation escalating. Taoiseach, the explicitly racist language being used by far-right groups is giving cover to others to engage in more subtle forms of racism. Tropes about the dangers posed by people who aren't local are now becoming alarmingly commonplace to hear. Taoiseach, Ireland as a country has always prided itself in being welcoming. For most of our history, we were a nation of emigrants. Millions of us left in search of a better life. Many who left Ireland suffered discrimination in countries they sought refuge in. We cannot allow that kind of targeted racist abuse and vilification to get a foothold here. That kind of behaviour cannot and must not be normalised or viewed as an acceptable form of protest. I think everybody in this House has a responsibility to show political leadership on this issue. There should be no equivocation about condemning the treatment of asylum seekers we are witnessing. I want to commend the actions of local communities all over the country who've already welcomed tens of thousands of refugees into their areas. Many have and are setting up welcoming committees to help integration in their communities, but they can't do this work all alone, Taoiseach. That's why we have to see communication from government with communities, not to offer vetoes, but to outline supports and provide resources that will help with integration. Because, Taoiseach, what we're learning so quickly is that without any communication, there is a huge void, and that void is being filled with misinformation, and the consequences of it are horrific. So, Taoiseach, my questions are, what is the government doing to address the recent spate of aggression and intimidation directed at asylum seekers? And secondly, the last government migrant integration strategy began in 2017 and concluded in 2021. When can we expect to see a new integration strategy for asylum seekers and refugees?
Thank you, Deputy Cairns. Taoiseach, please.
I just want to thank Deputy Cairns for raising this very important question, and also want to join her in condemning the violent protests and the intimidation and the racism that we've seen occur by some people at some protests in the past few weeks and months, and also the blocking of a public road restricting people's freedom is never an acceptable thing, and also want to condemn the alleged assault of a man in his 70s in County Clare the other day. Extend my best wishes to him and hope he makes a very speedy recovery, and I know the Gardaí will want to interview him and take action on the case. There is always a place in a democracy for peaceful protest, and people have a right to have their voices heard, but engaging in violence, engaging in intimidation, engaging in racism and restricting the freedom of others in a public place is not a legitimate form of protest, and I want to be very clear about that, and I think the House stands united on that. I think when it comes to this matter, we should never lose sight of the bigger picture, Ceann Comhairle. We're facing a major refugee crisis, not just here in Ireland, but all across Europe. We would have seen in most years 3,000 or 4,000 people come to Ireland each year looking for protection. In the past year, it's been closer to 100,000, most fleeing the war in Ukraine, but a very large number of people seeking international protection from other parts of Europe and outside of Europe as well. We are struggling to deal with it, but I think we've done a lot. Almost all of those 100,000 people who've come to our country in the past year have been provided with food, shelter, accommodation, access to healthcare, access to housing, access to education, and in many cases, that they've been provided with employment as well. And I want to particularly thank the Gardaí for the work that they've done in managing these protests, a very difficult job in a difficult situation, and also to recognise the communities that have accepted newcomers into their communities. And I was pleased to be present with Minister Bryan and Mr Humphreys in the North Inner City in Sean McDermott Street only last week, to announce €50 million worth of funding to communities around the country, recognising the value of their welcome and making sure that those communities benefit from investment in services and infrastructure. And I've asked ministers to work on the possibility of a similar fund again in a few months' time, given how well it's been received. I absolutely agree that information, communication, all of that's important. More than 100 new centres have been established to accommodate people from overseas. In the vast majority of cases, it's gone well. There haven't been protests, and communities have accepted those newcomers, but except in some places, things have fallen down, and we need to do better. And we all need to do better in that regard. But just to give you a small example, Minister Gorman and Minister Bryan and their teams have done over 20 meetings with local elected reps and community groups just in the short period behind us. And that, of course, is going to continue, and we're beefing up the communications team, both around Minister Bryan and by my department as well.
Taoiseach, we all appreciate that, and we need to see more of it, because the point is, when there isn't those meetings taking place, that empty void is filled with misinformation, and the consequence of that is what we're seeing, and it's too horrific to allow to continue. And speaking about the bigger picture, like you mentioned, Catherine Day, in a report last November, urged the government to develop a long-term strategy to the crisis. She said it was imperative that the government act quickly and build state-run, not-for-profit reception and integration centres. And she said it was feasible to deliver 2 by the end of this month and a further 4 by the end of the year. So I'm wondering if there's been any progress on that. I think because, like last week, there were more than 500 asylum seekers on the street with no available accommodation, and then the Irish Times were reporting that there was 1,250 vacant rest centre beds in 27 locations across the country. And then as we speak, 250 homeless asylum seekers are still looking for somewhere to go and only being provided with a €28 Duns voucher. It's difficult to feel like there is a real overall strategy that's actually working and having an impact on the ground and in the communities. Just for more questions, Taoiseach, you said on Friday that the Integration Minister, Varadkar Gorman, has been asked for and given more additional staff. Can you confirm how many additional staff in the Department of Integration have been seconded or hired to assist with this work? And what is the plan for the long-term strategy for state-run integration centres?
Thanks, Deputy. The Department of Integration and Equality is working on a range of new equality strategies. You'll be aware that the National Action Plan on Racism has already been published. There's also work being done on a migrant integration strategy, a traveller and Roma strategy, a new national strategy for women and girls, and the process on developing a new migrant integration strategy will begin soon. The Catherine Day report is a really good report, and she and her team did some excellent work. It is important to point out, though, that it was all done based on the assumption that we'd have somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 international protection applicants arriving every year, and the world has changed since then. But it remains our policy that we want to move away from direct provision, and the Minister is developing proposals for a dedicated migration agency and more state-run facilities, and we have some already. The number of staff has increased by 250, so 250 additional staff in the department, and more are sanctioned. And of course, we're doing a lot of work as well to speed up decision making, because we need to make sure that people who come here, who apply for international protection, that those who have the right to stay here get a decision in their favour soon, but that those who shouldn't be here and are not genuine people fleeing war and persecution get their decisions quickly as well, so that we can effect deportations, or at least issue deportation notices. So we have to do that as well.